I stood in the doorway of what had been my bedroom for 17 years, watching my stepson Marcus toss my belongings into cardboard boxes like they were garage sale leftovers. He didn't look up when I entered. He just kept moving, methodical, as if this room had always been destined. "What are you doing?" I asked. It was obvious. He finally glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. "What does it look like?" "I'm moving into the master. You can take the guest room down the hall. It's plenty big enough for one person." I felt something cold settle in my... Not anger, not yet, just disbelief. "This is my house, Marcus." He laughed. "Actually, technically, it's Mom's house, too, and she agrees with me. I need the space. I'm building a life here. You're just here." I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him that I had paid the mortgage on this house for nearly 2 decades, that I had welcomed him into my home when he was 12 years old, angry and grieving after his father left, that I had chosen to love him when I didn't have to. But the words caught in my throat, and he went back to packing my things like the conversation was over. That night I slept in the guest room. The bed was smaller, the walls were bare, and I lay there in the dark, wondering how I had become a guest in my own home. It hadn't always been like this. When I married Karen, Marcus was a kid who needed stability. His father had walked out without warning, and Karen was drowning in debt and I didn't have to step in. I chose to. I paid off her credit cards, nearly $18,000 spread across 5 different accounts. I refinanced her house under both our names so she wouldn't lose it to foreclosure. The payments had been 3 months behind when I met her. I caught everything up, paid the penalties, and restructured the loan so we could breathe. I took Marcus to soccer practice 3 times a week. Even when I was exhausted from 10-hour shifts, I helped him with homework at the kitchen table, explaining algebra concepts over and over until they... I sat through parent-teacher conferences when his grades slipped, when he got into fights, when he struggled to adjust. His teachers always asked where his father was. I'd say I was his stepfather, and they'd nod politely. But I could see the judgment, like I was playing at being a parent. I never tried to just tried to be present. For years it worked. Marcus called me by my first name, or Dad, but he smiled when I came home. He'd run to the door when he heard my truck pull into the driveway. He asked for advice about girls, about school, about what he should do with his life. He let me teach him how to change a tire on a rainy Saturday when his car broke down on the highway, how to grill a steak without burning it, how to manage a checking account, and why credit cards were dangerous if you didn't pay them off every month. Karen and I built something that felt like a family. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We had dinner together most nights. We watched movies on Friday evening. We took road trips to the coast every summer. I have photos from Marcus grinning with ice cream on his face, Karen laughing in the sun. I thought we were happy. I worked long hours as operations logistics company. The pay was good, $65,000 a year plus bonuses, and I made sure everything we needed was covered. Karen worked part-time at a dentist's office, answering phones and scheduling appointments. She brought home maybe $15,000 a year. I never made her feel small about it. I believed in partners. I believed in taking care of the people I loved. When Marcus graduated high school, I paid for his community college class 2 years, nearly $12,000 after financial. He studied business administration, but his heart wasn't in it. He skipped classes, failed tests, stopped showing up altogether the first year. When he told me he wanted to drop out, I didn't yell, I didn't lecture. I just asked him what he wanted to do instead. He said he wanted to work, to make real money, to figure things out on his own. I helped him get an entry-level job at a warehouse, a contact I had in the industry. He started at $14 an hour, which wasn't, but it was when he got his first apartment 6 months later, I co-signed the lease because his credit was non-existent. I bought him furniture from IKEA, spent a whole weekend assembling a bed frame, a desk, a bookshelf. I gave him dishes, towels, a coffee maker. I wanted him to succeed. I thought I was building a foundation of gratitude and respect. I was wrong. The shift started slowly, so slowly I didn't recognize. Marcus moved back home 2 years ago after losing his warehouse. He said it would be temporary, just a few months until he got back on his feet. The rent on his apartment was too high, and he'd fallen. I didn't hesitate. I told him his old room was... Karen was thrilled to have him back. She hugged him like he'd been gone for years instead of 18 months. She said it felt right having him home. I agreed. At the time, I agreed. But the months stretched on. Marcus didn't look for work with any urgency. He'd check job listings on his phone for 10 minutes in the morning, then spend the rest of the day on the couch. He slept until noon. He played video games until 3 in the morning, the sound effects bleeding through the walls. When I suggested he update his resume or go to job fairs, he'd shrug and say he was networking or exploring options. Karen defended him. She said he needed time to figure things out. She said she said I was being too hard on him, that not everyone could just jump into a career like I backed off. I didn't want to be the overbearing stepfather, didn't want to create tension in the. So I said nothing when Marcus started treating the place like a hotel. I said nothing when he ate the groceries I bought without contributing $1. I'd come home to find the deli meat gone, the cheese wrappers in the trash, the bread reduced to heels. I'd ask if anyone had eaten the leftovers I'd been planning for lunch, and Karen would say Marcus had been hungry. I said nothing when he borrowed my car and returned it with an empty gas. 3 times he did this. 3 times I had to fill up before I could get to work. When I mentioned it, he said he'd pay me back. He never did. Then the entitlement started to show itself in uglier ways. One evening, I came home from work. I had been dealing with the supply chain all week, vendors failing to deliver, clients screaming on the phone, my boss breathing down my neck about deadline. I just wanted to sit down with a beer and decompress. Marcus was sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, eyes glued to the TV. Some first-person shooter game, explosions and gunfire rattling the speakers. I asked him politely if he could move so I could sit down. He didn't even pause his game. There's other chairs. I stared at it. Marcus, I've been working all day. I'd like to sit on my own couch. Like I was the one being unreasonable. Like I'd just asked him to dig a ditch in the backyard. Fine, whatever. He got up and moved to the recliner, making sure I saw his annoyance. He threw himself into the chair, kept playing, and muttered something under his breath that sounded like unbelievable. Karen walked in from the kitchen and immediately asked what was wrong. I told her. She looked at me like I was overreacting. He was just comfortable. You didn't have to make a big deal about it. I didn't respond. I sat down on the couch, my beer in silence, wondering when I had become the problem in my own home. The disrespect became more frequent, more casual. Marcus started making comments about my age. I was 51, and he'd joke about me being an old man who didn't understand modern technology, modern culture, modern anything. He'd say it with a smirk, like it was all in good fun, but there was an edge to his voice, an edge that said he didn't think much of me at all. He made comments about my weight. I'd put on maybe 15 pounds over the years, nothing dramatic, but he'd poke at my stomach, and I walked by and say things like, "Someone's been hitting the fridge hard," or "Better lay off the beer, man." Karen would laugh along, a nervous little laugh, and I'd feel something inside me shrink a little more. One night, we were all eating dinner together. I had cooked, which I often did, because Karen worked late on Thursdays. I made pasta with marinara sauce, garlic bread, a simple salad. Nothing fancy, but I put effort into it. I chopped the vegetables myself, simmered the sauce for an hour, grated fresh Parmesan. Marcus took one bite and pushed his bland. I looked at him. "There's salt and pepper on." He rolled his eyes. "I shouldn't have to fix it. You should know how to cook by now." Karen didn't say anything. She just kept eating, eyes down, focused on her plate, like she couldn't hear what was happening 2 feet away. I felt a flicker of anger, but I swallowed it. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I told myself he was just being a moody 20-something. I told myself it would pass, but it didn't pass. It got worse. Marcus started inviting friends over without asking. They'd show up at 9, 10 at night, loud and careless. They'd drink beer from the fridge, beer I'd bought with my paycheck, and leave empty bottles on the coffee table, the kitchen counter, the porch railing. They'd order pizza and leave the boxes stacked on the floor, grease staining the carpet. They'd smoke cigarettes outside, and I'd find the butts scattered in the flower beds the next morning. When I asked Marcus to clean up, he'd say he'd get to it later. He never did. I'd end up picking up the mess myself, filling trash bags with their garbage, vacuuming the crumbs they'd left behind. Karen would thank me quietly, but she never said anything. She never told him to be more respectful. She never told his friends they couldn't come over. I started spending more time at work. I'd volunteer for extra projects. I'd stay late to finish reports that could have waited until morning. It was easier than being home. At work, I had control. I had respect. People listened when I spoke. They valued my opinion. They didn't make me feel like I was. At home, I was invisible unless someone needed something from me. Then came the bedroom incident. Marcus had been talking for weeks about needing more space. He said his room was too small, that he couldn't think clearly, that he needed a better environment. I didn't pay much attention. I figured he was just complaining, the way people do when they're unhappy with their circumstances. But then he started making comments about the master bedroom, how big it was, how much natural light it got, how it had the walk-in closet and the ensuite bathroom, how it seemed like a waste for just 2 people. Karen agreed with him. She said it did seem excessive. She said maybe we didn't need all that. She said maybe it made sense to let Marcus, since he was home more during the day. I reminded her that it was our bedroom, that we had shared it for 17 years. It was, by any reasonable standard, appropriate for a married couple to have the master bedroom in their own home. She said I was being selfish, that I wasn't thinking about Marcus's need, that I was being stubborn to be stubborn. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know how to explain that I wasn't being selfish for wanting to keep my own bedroom. I didn't know how to make her see that Marcus is 30 years old and should have been working towards his own place. So when I came home that day and found Marcus packing my things, I realized this wasn't a spontaneous decision. This had been discussed, planned, agreed upon, without me. I moved into the guest room without a fight. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd figure out a way to fix it. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. I knew I had lost something I couldn't name. The next few weeks were strange. Marcus settled into the master bedroom like a king claiming his throne. He rearranged the furniture, pushed the bed against the opposite wall, moved the dresser to where the reading chair used to be. He put up posters, band artwork, and movie prints that clashed with everything. He brought in his gaming setup, a massive desk, and 3 monitors that took up half the room. He hung LED lights that glowed blue and purple at night, turning the room into something unrecognizable. Karen seemed happy. She said it was nice to see him taking initiative, making the space his own, finally acting like he had direction. I barely recognized my own house. I started eating dinner alone. I'd come home late, around 8 or 9, heat up leftovers in the microwave, and eat in the guest room while watching TV on my laptop. Karen and Marcus would be in the living room laughing at some show, and I'd feel like an outsider looking in, like I was visiting a place I used to belong. One Saturday, I was in the kitchen making coffee when Marcus walked in. He opened the fridge, looked around with a frown, then turned to me. "We're out of eggs," he said. I nodded. "I'll pick some up later." He frowned. "Can you go now?" I wanted to make breakfast. I looked at him. I had just woken up. I was still in my pajamas, barefoot, on the cold tile. "I'll go after I finish my coffee." That same dramatic sigh, like I was inconveniencing him on purpose. "Forget it. I'll just order something." He pulled out his phone and walked away, muttering under his breath about how no one cared about what he needed. I stood there with my coffee, familiar coldness. This was my life. I was the errand boy in my own home, the man who paid for everything but was expected to ask permission to exist. But something else was happening, something I didn't notice. I had always handled the finance. I paid the bills, managed the accounts, made sure everything was in order. I used a budgeting app to track expenses, set up automatic payments for the mortgage, utilities, insurance. Karen had access to everything, but she rarely checked. She trusted me to handle it. Marcus, as far as I knew, had no idea how anything worked. He'd never asked, never shown interest. Then one afternoon, I got a call from my bank. The representative, a woman named Linda, said there had been some unusual activity on one of my accounts and they wanted to verify a few transactions. Nothing alarming, she assured me, just routine security checks. I told her I'd look into it. When I checked my account online, I saw several withdrawals I didn't recognize. Not huge amounts, but enough to notice. 300 here, 250 there, another 400, all made from ATMs I'd never used in parts of town I rarely visited. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I scrolled through the transaction history. Over the past 6 weeks, nearly $2,000 had been taken out in cash. $2,000 I didn't withdraw. I called Karen. She was at work, but she picked up after 3 rings. I asked her if had made any withdrawals recent. She said no. I asked if Marcus had access to my account. There was a pause. Why would you that? Because there are withdrawals I didn't. Another pause. Longer this time. He might have borrowed your card once for groceries. I told him it was okay. I closed. I could feel the anger building, but I kept my voice steady. You told him it was okay to use my debit card without asking me? He's family. Like that explained everything. Like that made theft acceptable. Don't make this into a big deal. $2,000, Karen. He took $2,000. He was going to pay you back. When? She didn't. I hung up. I didn't trust myself to say anything else. That night, I changed my PIN. I called the bank and reported the card as compromised. They issued me a new one. I moved money into a separate account Marcus couldn't have. An account at a different bank. And I didn't tell Karen. I didn't tell anyone. I just did it quietly, the way you do when you realize you can't trust people you live with. And I started paying attention. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way Marcus talked about money like it limitless, like it appeared out of thin air. The way he'd mention wanting new shoes, a new phone, a new laptop, and then somehow have those things a week later. The way Karen dismissed my concerns about expenses, waving her hand and said, "We're fine, we could afford it." But she didn't know what we could afford. She didn't look at the bank statement. She didn't see the credit card balances creeping up, the savings account shrinking month by month. I pulled up our financial records. I went through everything, line by line. Over the past 2 years, since Marcus had moved back home, our expenses had increased 40%. Groceries had tripled. Utilities were higher because someone was home all day. The air conditioning, lights left on in every room. The internet bill had doubled because Marcus insisted on the premium package for his gaming. We were spending more than I was bringing in. We were burning through savings to cover the gap. At this rate, we'd be broke in less than a year. I started wondering what would happen if I stopped, if I just let go. Would they notice? They care? Would they even realize I was the only thing holding this house together? I didn't have to wonder for long. A few days later, I was working from home when the doorbell rang. I answered it and found a man in a suit holding a clipboard. He was young, be 30, with wire-rimmed glasses and an apologetic expression. He introduced himself as a processor and handed me an envelope. "You've been served," then walked back to his car and drove away. I stood there staring at the envelope. My hands were... I opened it right there on the porch, pulling out the papers inside. It was a partition. Marcus was suing me to force the sale of the house. I read the document 3 times. Sense of it. The claim was that because Karen co-owned the house and because Marcus, her son, he had a vested interest in the property. He was arguing that the house should be sold and the proceeds divided. As if he had contributed anything, as if he had any right to a single dollar of equity I had built over 17 years. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I called Karen immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Did you know about this?" "What?" But her voice too careful, too measured. "Marcus is suing me. He wants to..." Silent. "Karen, do you know? He mentioned he was talking to a lawyer, but I didn't think he'd... I didn't want to upset you." It came out bitter and sharp, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. Well, mission accomplished. I hung up before she could say anything else. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the guest room, staring at the wall, trying to understand how my life had come to this. I had given everything to this family. I had worked, sacrificed, supported, and loved. And now I was being sued by the person I had tried to raise as my own. But beneath the shock and the hurt, something else was, something cold and clear. I realized I had been playing by rules no one else was following. I had been operating under the assumption that loyalty and love were reciprocal, that if I gave, I would receive, that if I supported, I would be supported. I was wrong. And now I had a choice. I could keep playing the same game, keep hoping things would change, keep letting myself be diminished, or I could stop. I could stop trying to convince them I mattered. I could stop asking for respect I would never receive. I could stop pretending this was a family. I opened my laptop and started. I wanted to understand my options. I wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with. The partition action was real, but it wasn't simple. Because Karen and I were married, the house was considered marital property. Marcus, her son, had no legal claim unless he could prove some kind of ownership or contribution, which he couldn't. He had never paid a dime toward the mortgage, the property tax, or the maintenance. He had no documentation, no receipts, no proof of any financial involvement, but the lawsuit itself was expensive to defend. Filing fees, attorney costs, court appearances could drag on for months, and it was public, messy, humiliating. I realized the point. Marcus wasn't trying to win. He was trying to pressure me. He was betting I'd rather settle, rather sell, rather give up than fight. He didn't know me as well as he thought. I called a lawyer the next morning, a family law attorney named Rebecca Chen, whom I had worked with years ago on an unrelated estate matter. I explained the situation. She listened carefully, asked a few questions about the house, the marriage, Marcus's involvement, then said, "You have options. Tell me. First, you can fight the partition. It's a weak case. He has no standing. We can get it dismissed probably within second. Second, you can file for divorce and protect your assets before this gets worse." The word hung in the air. Divorce. I hadn't let myself think it. I had been holding on, hoping that somehow things would shift back, that Karen would wake up and see what was happening, that Marcus would grow up and move out, that I'd get my life back without having to blow everything up. But I wouldn't. Not like this. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. Every day you wait, things get more complicated. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't tell Karen about the lawyer. I didn't tell her I was considering divorce. I just went about my days quietly, observing, documenting, preparing. I started keeping records. Every bill I paid, I saved a copy. Every expense I covered, I photographed the receipt. Every conversation where Marcus made demands or Karen dismissed I wrote down afterward with details. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I knew that if this went to court, I needed evidence. I also started looking at my finances. I had always thought of everything as ours, our house, our money, our future. But legally, things were more complicated. The house was in both our names, but I had made the down payment. I had paid 85% of the mortgage. I had covered the property tax, the insurance, the repairs. I had documentation, all of it. I started separating. I opened a new checking account at a credit union across town and had my paycheck deposited there. I moved investments into accounts that were solely in my name, IRAs and mutual funds that predated the marriage. I stopped paying for things that weren't essential. If Marcus wanted groceries, he could buy them himself. If Karen wanted to go out to dinner, she could pay. I didn't announce these changes. I just did them, quietly, methodically. And I watched. Marcus didn't know. He was too busy enjoying the master bedroom, too busy living like he owned the... But after a few weeks, things started to... The fridge wasn't as full. The pantry wasn't stocked the way it used to be. The bills took longer to get paid, and the late fees started appearing. The little luxuries, the streaming subscriptions, speed internet, the premium cable package started disappearing one by one. Karen noticed. She asked me what was going on one evening when I came home from work. "I'm cutting back," I said simply. "On what?" "On everything. We need to be more careful with money." She frowned, confused. "We've never had to be careful." I really looked, and I saw someone who had taken me for granted for so long she didn't even realize. Things changed. Marcus was subtle. He confronted me one evening when I came home, blocking my path in the hallway. "Why is the internet so slow?" he demanded. I downgraded the plan. Why? Because it's expensive. We're paying $130 a month for speeds you don't need. He stared at me like I had just told him the earth was flat. I need fast internet. I'm streaming. I'm gaming. I can't do that with this garbage speed. Shrugged. Then pay for an upgrade yourself. His face darkened. This is ridiculous. You're being petty. I didn't respond. I just walked past him and went to my room. I heard him slam his door a moment later. The walls shook. That night, I heard him arguing with Karen in the living room. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard my name. I heard controlling and selfish and cheapskate. I heard Karen trying to calm him down, trying to defend me, but her heart wasn't in it. It was just trying to keep the... I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and felt... The lawsuit moved forward slowly. Rebecca filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that Marcus had no standing and that his claims were frivolous. The judge scheduled a hearing for 6 weeks. In the meantime, I continued my quiet separation. I stopped cooking for anyone but I'd make a single portion, eat it in my room, and walk. I stopped doing Marcus's laundry, which I'd been doing without even thinking about. I stopped leaving money on the counter for Karen to use for household expenses. I stopped participating in the life of the house entirely. I became a ghost in my own home, present but not participant. Karen tried to talk to me. She'd knock on my door and ask if I was okay, if something was wrong, if we could talk. I'd tell her I was fine. I'd tell her I was just tired. I'd tell her we could talk later. We never did. Marcus, meanwhile, became increasingly agitated. He wasn't used to being told no. He wasn't used to things not going his way. He started making more demands, more accusations. He told Karen I was trying to sabotage him. He told her I was trying to ruin their relation. He said I'd always resented him, that I'd never really accepted him, that I was finally showing my true colors. Karen believed him, or at least she didn't argue. One evening, she came into my room and closed the door behind me. Older than I remembered. There were lines around her eyes I hadn't noticed before. "We need to talk about the lawsuit." "What about it?" "Marcus thinks you should just agree to sell. He says it's the fair thing to do, that we've been here long enough, that maybe it's time for a change." I looked at her. "Fair? He's my son. He deserves a future. He deserves a chance to build something. And I don't? That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" She sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded. "I'm saying maybe it's time to let go. Maybe we've outgrown this house. Maybe it's time to move on, start fresh, somewhere new." I felt something break inside me, not loudly, dramatically, just a quiet snap, like a thread finally giving way after. "Okay." She looked surprised. "Okay?" "Yeah," she smiled. "Thank you. I think this is the right decision. I really do." I didn't tell her what I was really thinking. I didn't tell her that I wasn't agreeing to sell the house. I was agreeing to move on from her, from Marcus, from all of it. The next morning, I called Rebecca. "File for divorce," I said. There was a pause. "Are you sure?" "Okay, I'll draft the papers. We'll have them ready by end of week." "Thank you. One more thing. In cases like this, you'll want to document everything, every financial contribution, every instance of disrespect or manipulation. The court will care." "I already have." "Good. Then we have a strong case." 2 days later, Karen was served with divorce papers at work when it happened. Rebecca called me to confirm. "It's done." She was served at home around noon. I thanked her and hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It was over, or at least the pretending was over. When I got home that evening, Karen was waiting for me in the living room. Her eyes were red and swollen. The divorce papers were on the coffee table, corners already wrinkled like she'd been gripping them too hard. "How could you?" I set my bag down by the door. "How could I what?" "Divorce me. Without even talking to me. Without even trying." I looked. "We haven't really talked in years, Karen." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me how I was? When was the last time you stood up for me when Marcus disrespected me? When was the last time you made me feel like I mattered?" She opened her mouth. No words. "I gave you everything," I continued, my voice. "I paid for this house. I raised your son. I built a life with. I worked 60-hour weeks so you didn't have to worry about money. And you let him push me out of my own bedroom. You let him sue me. You took his side over and over again, and you never once asked me how I felt about it." Tears ran down her face. "I didn't know you felt this way." "You didn't want to know." She stood up, her hands shaking. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through it. Please." "No, I can't." She stared at me, and I saw the moment she realized I meant it. The moment she understood that I wasn't coming back, that this was. Marcus came home an hour later. He saw the papers on the table. He saw Karen crying in the kitchen, and he looked at me with pure rage. "This is your fault." His voice low and venomous. I didn't respond. "You're tearing this family apart. You're destroying everything." I almost laughed. "There is no family, Mark. There's just people who took from me until there was nothing left." He stepped toward me, fists clenched at his side. "You think you're so much better than. You think you're so perfect. No, I just think I deserve better than this." He looked like he wanted to hit me. His jaw was tight, his breathing heavy. But he didn't. He just stood there, shaking with anger. I walked past him and went to my room. I closed the door and locked it. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The divorce moved forward quickly. Karen didn't. She couldn't. The evidence was overwhelming. I had bank statements showing I'd paid 85% of all household expenses over 17 years. I had tax returns proving my income dwarfed hers. I had documentation of every major purchase, every home repair, every financial decision. Rebecca was thorough. She built a case that left no room for argument. Marcus's lawsuit was dismissed 3 weeks later. The judge ruled he had no standing. He wasn't on the deed. He hadn't contributed to the property. He had no legal claim whatsoever. The judge actually scolded his attorney for bringing such a frivolous case to court. I wasn't there to see Marcus's face, but I heard he stormed out of the courtroom. I put the house on the market immediately, not because Marcus wanted me, but because I didn't want to live there anymore. Too many memories, too much bitterness staining every room. It sold within a month. The market was good, and the house was indecent. I took my share of the proceeds, nearly 80%, after Rebecca put my contributions, and bought a small condo closer to work. 2 bedrooms, one for me, and one for a home office. Quiet neighborhood, modern appliances, a balcony overlooking a park, no one to answer to but myself. Karen moved in with Marcus. He had finally gotten a job, something in retail, and rented a 2-bedroom apartment across town. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were struggling, that Marcus was difficult to live with, that he complained constantly, that Karen was exhausted, working full-time now to help cover expenses. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel anything. One evening, about 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting on my balcony with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Karen. "I'm sorry. I should have treated you. I hope you're okay." I read it. Then I deleted it. I didn't need her I didn't need closure. I had already moved on. I spent the next few months rebuilding. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected, guys from work I used to grab drinks with before life. I started going to the gym again, pushing my through workouts that left me sore but satisfied. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, woodworking, hiking, reading books that had been sitting on my shelf for years. I traveled, nothing extravagant, just weekend trips to places I'd always wanted to see. The mountain, the coast, small towns with good food and quiet. I breathed. People at work noticed the change. They said I seemed lighter, happier, more present in meetings. I had energy again, I had focus. I wasn't carrying the weight of a family that didn't want me anymore. I didn't miss Karen, I didn't miss Marcus. I didn't miss the constant feeling of not being enough, of always giving more than I received. I had my dignity back, I had my life back, and that was all I needed.